Good morning. I'm James Exum, also known as Sakshi, which is the name I gave my soul a few years back so that I could have a better relationship with my soul, which is also known as the Atman, which, as you know by now, if you've listened to any of my videos, the Atman, the soul, is a divine spark on loan to the human body from Brahman, our creator. It stays with us, whispers words of encouragement, wisdom, but it does not interfere. It is simply the witness. Today, continuing my discourses on YouTube, I'm about to introduce my latest. I wrote just a while back, and this one is called The Interplay of Ignorance and Bliss. It's a philosophical discourse for spiritual seekers. Spiritual seekers. Yoga is not a religion. I am not a guru. I am basically self-taught over the last 50 odd years from practicing and studying the great works of knowledge concerning the subject of yoga. Yoga is a science. To me, yoga is a science. Yoga is the science of life. Yoga is the science of living. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, by the way, it's Friday, about 9 o'clock in the morning here in Austin, Texas, where I've lived most of my adult life. In fact, all of my adult life. I came here when I was 19 years old. And it's September the 26th. So let's go. I'm reading from my screen, my notes on my screen. I had to change the setting on my notes. I'm an older man and I'm post cataract surgery. That's why I had to change the settings. So let's move along now and dive right in here and see what we have. I wrote this, but I have not reviewed it. I did corrections along the way, and that's about it. So we're talking now about ignorance and its relationship with bliss. The age-old adage, ignorance is bliss, invites both curiosity and skepticism amongst spiritual seekers and philosophers alike. What does it truly mean for ignorance to coexist with bliss? Is bliss attainable only through knowledge, or can unawareness foster a sense of contentment? Here we're using contentment and bliss as synonyms, and fostering is a false creative process in this sentence to make you think you are living a blissful life. Actually, you're living most of the time a life of ignorance, and you're ignoring reality, true reality, which is the goal of yoga. Note the knowledge of true reality. One of the goals of yoga. Is bliss attainable only through knowledge, or can unawareness foster a sense of contentment? Well, I would say it does. This discourse explores these profound questions through the lens of yogic philosophy, weaving in the contemplative insights of myself. I'm also known as James Exum. I'm also known as Sakshi. Sometimes I write the third person, which is not unusual for yogis. I am drawing upon a spectrum of yogic wisdom, which I have accumulated through the years. And you and I both seek to illuminate the relationship between ignorance and bliss by offering a thoughtful examination for we who are on the path of self-inquiry. Self-inquiry is one of the keys to personal wisdom and advancement. In yogic philosophy, ignorance is not merely a lack of information, it is a fundamental misunderstanding of the true nature of reality. When you operate, your operating system is based on ignorance, then you are fundamentally operating under a misunderstanding of reality. The Sanskrit term avidya refers to this spiritual ignorance, which is considered the root cause of suffering and bondage. When I was growing up, there was no, this is back in the 50s and 60s, there was no saying, money is the root of all evil. Well, I'm saying here, ignorance perpetuates a form of evil. A commonly cited verse from the Yoga Sutras, that's the one by Patanjali, states, ignorance is perceiving the non-eternal as eternal, the impure as pure, pain as pleasure, and the non-self as the self. This encapsulates the yogic view that ignorance distorts perception, leading individuals to seek fulfillment in transient and illusory phenomena. Sometimes you might want to review what I have said by playing this portion again. I'm not trying to talk over your head. This is just the way I think and write and speak. Similarly, the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 15, proclaims, quote, knowledge is covered by ignorance, thereby living entities are bewildered. Well, on your deathbed, you are going to be bewildered if you're still in a state of ignorance, I can assure you. On your sickbed, you are bewildered. The moment you realize you have become sick, humanly sick, physically sick, there's a few seconds there of bewilderment, panic mixed with bewilderment. You go, well, first you reject it. I don't deserve this. This can't be what's happening to me. Well, if it's happening to you, there's no denial. And denial is another form of ignorance. Unlike fleeting pleasures, ananda is described as a deep, abiding joy rising from self-realization and union with the ultimate reality, Brahman. This concept of bliss or ananda occupies a revered place in yogic thought. Bliss is not the product of ignorance, but the fruit of knowledge. There's where true bliss is. Not a product of ignorance, but the fruit of knowledge. A direct experience of one's true nature, when you're in contact and alignment and correlation with your true nature. You're in a higher state of bliss than the artificial state of bliss that ignorance projects upon your mind. The Taittiriya Upanishad offers a poetic meditation on bliss, quote, he who knows the bliss of Brahman, from whence words turn back and mind retreats, is never afraid, unquote. Here bliss is linked to transcendence, a state beyond the dualities of pleasure and pain, attainable through spiritual insight. Now again, yoga is not religion, but being spiritual, you could be spiritual without being religious. Your spirit is your soul. Soul can be as religious as it wants to be, or be as stoic as it wants to be, or be any way it wants to be. It is the soul. Its primary purpose is as your witness while it inhabits the human body during your finite lifespan. Yogic philosophy thus distinguishes between superficial happiness born of ignorance and the profound bliss that arises through wisdom. While ignorance may shield one from certain discomforts, it ultimately perpetuates a cycle of dissatisfaction and longing. That bears repeating. It ultimately perpetuates a cycle of dissatisfaction and longing. Now here's a section I wrote with my personal insights on ignorance and bliss. Well, all of this is my insight, but this is labeled that so that it should carry a greater amount of weight to my listeners and my followers, so to speak. I'm known in spiritual circles as Sakshi. I offer a nuanced perspective on the interplay of ignorance and bliss. I emphasize the importance of self-awareness by suggesting that true bliss is not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of understanding. I have often reflected, and here's one of my quotes, bliss is not found in the shadow of ignorance, but in the light of recognition. I draw upon the yogic teachings that ignorance may temporarily insulate one from existential anxieties, yet it also keeps the soul confined within the boundaries of the ego. The ego should be within the boundaries of the soul, not vice versa. I wrote, to remain ignorant is to dwell in a comfortable illusion, but to awaken is to embrace the vastness of your true being. In this view, ignorance is a veil, and bliss is the unveiling. I echo yogic wisdom and remind you that true contentment arises when the heart is unburdened by misconception and the mind rests in clarity. My insights invite us to examine whether so-called bliss is rooted in ignorance, is genuine, or merely a respite from deeper truths. I'm not trying to be vainglorious when I'm quoting myself. I'm just simply reading to you thoughts I've written down during my journey through my path of yoga, on my path of yoga, along my path of yoga. The interplay of ignorance and bliss, analyzing the paradoxes. Well, I wrote about 10 paradoxes in yoga, and here's an additional one. It just happened to come up. The notion that ignorance is bliss is paradoxical from the yogic standpoint. On one hand, ignorance can shield individuals from uncomfortable realities, providing temporary solace. On the other hand, yogic philosophy asserts that lasting bliss is only possible through knowledge, specifically the knowledge of one's own true nature. The Katha Upanishad offers a striking passage, quote, "The ignorant go after outward pleasures and fall into the snares of widespread death, but the wise, knowing immortality, seek not the inferior," unquote. This suggests that ignorance leads to transient happiness, while true bliss is the reward of spiritual insight, higher spiritual insight, by the way. My reflections resonate with this teaching, and I note, quote, "The comfort of ignorance is fragile, easily shattered by life's uncertainties. The bliss of wisdom endures, grounded in unchanging essence of self, the unchanging essence of self," unquote. Thus, the interplay between ignorance and bliss invites seekers to move beyond superficial contentment towards authentic joy. There's where the title came from. Now I'm going to do some PowerPoint quotes from different yogic texts. Yoga Sutra 2.5, ignorance is perceiving the non-eternal as eternal, the impure as pure, plain as pleasure, and the non-self as self. That's where I got that quote earlier in my writing. Gita, chapter 5:15, knowledge is covered by ignorance, thereby living entities are bewildered. Source of that quote. The Taittiriya Upanishad, he who knows the bliss of Brahman, from whence words turn back in mind retreats, is never afraid. and so on and so forth. Now I'm just basically giving you the source of those different ways. Each of these quotes, whether from ancient scripture or contemporary insight, underscores the journey from ignorance to knowledge as a passage from fleeting happiness to enduring bliss. Once you learn that your soul is immortal and the soul is the master of the brain, mind, intellect complex, then you have a truer understanding of who you are, and you're no longer roaming around in the woodlands of ignorance. You have escaped from the darkness of that forest and walked into the pasture of light, which is the understanding and the accomplishment of reaching true bliss. Here's our conclusion. The relationship between ignorance and bliss, as explored through yogic philosophy and the teachings of myself, reveals a subtle but profound truth. While ignorance may offer temporary comfort, it is knowledge, self-awareness, and spiritual discernment that leads to authentic and lasting bliss. The wisdom of the yogic tradition encourages seekers to look beyond the illusions of ignorance and embrace the transformative power of insight. And I hope my words are gentle, and I hope my teachings are gentle, and I hope I come across as humble and not arrogant. Here's my words I want to leave you with on this subject. Quote, "Let your bliss be the song of awakening, not the silence of unknowing." Unquote. For those who walk the spiritual path, the pursuit of bliss is inseparable from the quest to overcome ignorance, moving ever closer to the luminous heart, true heart of your being. And there it is. That wasn't so bad, seeing as I wrote it and did not revise it in any way once it was written. I revise as I write. As you notice, I revise as I speak. That's an old habit of yoga philosophers, yoga teachers, and yoga writers. Writers tend to revise. Well, I have absorbed that physical habit of writing and revising into my mental habit of revising my speech as I go along. The points I'm making, like speaking as I go along. And there it is. So I'll leave you with that, and this is my latest video. I'll be posting it here in a little while. I haven't had breakfast yet, but I'm going to enjoy it now that I've gotten my hard work, so to speak, which actually is joyful, out of the way for the day. I'm trying to post a minimum of one video a day, and that's not bad for an old man approaching his 75th. My 75th is next Tuesday, September the 30th. On September 30th, 1950. And here we are. So I'll leave you with my usual thoughts of be good to yourself, be good to others, and more especially be good to strangers. Who knows what benefit may come from that. And remember, it's an imperfect world. It always has been. It seems a bit more nowadays, but that's okay too, because it's being revised even as we sit here and have this shared conversation, so to speak. It's a one-way conversation, but you're welcome to participate in it by sharing it with other friends. That's up to you. If you enjoyed it, thank you. And if you did not, that's all right. That's okay too. And I'll see you next time, and thanks for listening.